One of my favorite parts of season 4 of Bridgerton was the Mondrichs, and I actually do think that they are some of the best used characters, considering they could have easily been tossed aside at the end of season 1. But they keep coming back, and they are now at a point where they are being used so well that they are fully acting as a bridge for the audience to understand why the society works the way it does. When looking at any of the other characters in the show, it's actually the Mondrichs who have the most clear story progression throughout each season. In season 1, they are very much the working class. They are starting with Simon, and they're very much like just boxers, and they kind of are in the gambling ring, and it's a very more precarious situation than anything else. At the end of season 1, Will Mondrich essentially decides to agree to an illegal bet, throwing a boxing match in order to gain a lot of money, and he uses this money to open a club, and this is where we start to see them rise in the ranks of society naturally. Season 2 is when we see them kind of struggle with this new life that they're being introduced to. They are not the height of society, that is to be very clear. However, they are now in the fringes of this world, where they are opening the doors to the people who are at the height of society. They are becoming friends with them, and they are also struggling with the fact that they can't get many patrons in because there are a lot of people and a lot of other bars that they want to frequent. In the end, the club does become very successful, mostly with the help of the Bridgertons, because of course the Bridgertons have to help with everything. And then in season 3, it's where it starts to shift a bit more, because they find out that Alice's relation, of a very distant relation, has died and has left the entire estate to essentially Alice's child, because he is the nearest male relative of this far, far away relative. And so they are suddenly now the parents to a lord. This skyrockets the Mondrichs from suddenly being very, very poor in season 1, working class at trying to scramble for money, to literally the pinnacle of everything they have kind of detested in a weird way for a very long time. And it is this rise to society that allows season 4 to happen with Alice's storyline. And I loved this storyline. I thought it was incredibly well done, wherein Alice, being from the working class, being a fully grown adult and a mother who has never really been taught the ways of like kind of dampening down her actual opinions the way that society teaches most young women, is able to stand at the Queen's right hand in Lady Danbury's place when Lady Danbury wants to leave. But beyond Alice and Will just having a very clear narrative progression to their storyline, unlike most of the other characters, I do think they actually present an interesting outlook into society, because these are two people who can realistically criticize society for what it is, because they have seen something else. And they are the only characters in the Bridgerton universe at this point who have that ability. We see Benedict and Eloise throughout a lot of Bridgerton criticize society and criticize the ton, while also themselves coming from an incredibly privileged background and not wanting to give that up, because they understand deep down what it means to have it. Whereas Alice and Will did not come from society. They did not come from the level of privilege that the Bridgertons did. And so when they criticize it, it is from the eyes of people who have not been there always. And therefore it kind of holds more weight and more validity to it. Whereas Eloise and Benedict can almost just be seen as complaining sometimes. Even though their criticisms are valid, the fact that they aren't really willing to give up, and we know they aren't willing to give up their privilege, it does ring a little bit false sometimes. I think this is especially shown with the fact that although Eloise and Benedict would complain about society, we never get to see them think of an alternative. Whereas Will and Alice, because they have lived an alternative, are able to introduce that to society. When Benedict kind of introduces them to the ton and says like, you're married, you can do whatever you want, they truly decide, let's do whatever we want. Let's not go to a ball. Let's not do this thing that we don't want to do, because we haven't always done that. We don't want to do that, and maybe society will forgive us. And I do think that this is a privilege afforded to mainly married people, so there is something to be said about Benedict and Eloise not being able to do that. However, they do still conform. They do still do what their mother says they need to do at all times of the day, pretty much, because that is what they are raised knowing. I am wondering if the actress of Lady Danbury is gone for good, or if she is going to get potentially her nephew to come back to the show, because that would be pretty cool. But if not, if she is going for good, whether Alice is basically being staged to replace her, which I do think would be sad because Lady Danbury is such an incredible character, but I understand because I think Alice would be a good stand-in for Lady Danbury, because she's outspoken, because she understands the world beyond the palace walls. What she said to the Queen at the end of season 4 was so incredibly poignant. Her saying that the world exists beyond these four walls and the Queen is missing all the good gossip rings true, because Alice has lived this life. From starting as two people people, incredibly working class, struggling to get meal to meal, they have now become some of the most powerful people in the ton without the rest of the ton really realizing. Because Alice is at the ear of the Queen, and frankly, is the only one the Queen might listen to now that Lady Danbury is gone. They have the potential to change a lot about society without even really understanding how society has functioned for years because they've been on the outskirts of it. And I think that's a great benefit and opens so many doors to how Bridgerton can actually have properly happy endings. For those of you who didn't read the books, Benedict and Sophie's story ends a little different. I'm glad they changed so much of Benedict's story because I don't know if anyone's seen my other videos, but I hated book Benedict Bridgerton. He was the worst. He absolutely sucked. Show Benedict was great. This season was amazing. Loved it. One of the main things they changed at the end is that Sophie and Benedict kind of do have to isolate themselves away from society. They are kind of alone, and that is what they were told they would have to be if they were to marry. Whereas in the show, they pretend that Sophie is legitimate, and they make it so that they can fit into society without any shame or any kind of isolation. And the main reason this is validated is because of Alice Mondrich, who kind of plays this whole scheme together and plays the Queen, and the Queen is so amused by it that she goes along with it, because Alice understands that the one thing the Queen loves more than anything is good entertainment, and so she plays into that. None of this happens in the books, and so I think it's a really good addition that the show has made to create this world that is a lot more full and a lot more vibrant and dynamic than it was in the books. Perhaps the books were more realistic, sure, but let's be clear, this is a fantasy show. Everyone is aware that this is a fantastical show. These people were not wearing glitter dresses to balls. This was not happening, and so I think we are allowed to take a couple liberties in the world that has been created. All this to be said, I can't wait to see where the Mondrichs go. I'm really excited for season 5. I think they are great characters that are now being used to their full potential, which is just great to see. And it'll be interesting to see if Alice and the power goes to her head a little bit, what Will does, if he becomes more of like a kind of like housewife sort of area, because they do still have kid stories, even though they have a lot of help now. They are active parents because they've always been active parents. It's really interesting to see where they will go with this storyline because it is one of the most interesting ones, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think of Will and Alice. I know they're kind of a contentious couple because a lot of people think they should have been dropped at season 1, but I really like them, and I think if you take away the fact that they aren't in the books, they are a brilliant, brilliant addition to the show.